thank you all for this opportunity today. I was reading in Wall Street Journal the gentleman that took over Ferrari, and he was like, go faster. And I think that's what you're going to see today with this presentation. Get ready. There's a test, by the way, so you better pay attention. I'm going to ask some questions. I'm not going to talk about electrophysiology. We'll stick to pottery. But don't be afraid to ask questions toward the end. We're going through a lot of pottery forms. This overview of Middle Tennessee pottery, we don't have a lot of information that's come out there before. So it's been exciting for me doing the presentation of it's been a discovery process as well. So let me make sure I got the slide. All right, so we're going to talk about specifically Middle Tennessee pottery, these 4 potteries, Lafever, Dunn, Hedgecough, and Roberts. But I'm also going to give you a view into some of the historical forms that'll build you up to the specific families, and also we'll talk about more of these art pottery forms. The region we're talking about is actually, we're talking about Middle Tennessee pottery, but guess what? We're east. Most of our pottery in Middle Tennessee is happening in the Cumberland Plateau. And I'm not going to give a long explanation for that other than giving you some idea of geological formations. The central basin is really Middle Tennessee, and you can see the Cumberland Plateau here. And the question comes in, why don't we have more surviving earthenware and stoneware from Middle Tennessee, Davis County, Williamson County, even slightly west of here? And probably the best illustration is this view of bedrock. The Central Basin is largely absent of a lot of these large pottery deposits. And as you get over to the Cumberland Plateau, they're more plentiful. So Smith and Rogers survey on Tennessee pottery, volume 1 and 2, is kind of the handbook, the Bible for much of Tennessee pottery. This map comes from there, and it really illustrates what's happening in terms of pottery making, traditional pottery making in Middle Tennessee. Notice the concentration of potteries that are over east of Wilson County, Davis County, Williamson County, and they concentrate in Putnam, DeKalb, White County. So with that, I'm going to transition and show you some of the traditional pottery forms, the 19th century stoneware forms that I'll describe here. But with that, I will say a brief statement about earthenware. Earthenware, if anybody knows me, is a real passion of mine in terms of especially East Tennessee earthenware. What's interesting is we have a real dearth of evidence of earthenware from the Middle Tennessee region. We knew that there were Moravian missionaries and that had potting skills that were working in Nashville in the late 18th century, but we do not have enough evidence of actual earthenware forms that have come from this region. So it was what we would think is a quick transition to stoneware. This is a rundlet that is actually now in the State Museum that was sold several years ago with us at auction. But it is by James C. Crawley, who was born in Maryland but came down and lived in White County, which was showing a blow up of that plateau area. And it is in script, I think it's dated 1851. But also notice the color of these clays. Notice that this stoneware has this green to brown. You're going to see green to brown to gray transition. And it's something that characteristically, as you're reviewing sales or things out there, it sometimes is a clue to identifying pottery from this region. This is an example of James Lafever. We're going to talk about the Lafever family more, but this is an early example. He was working 1816 to 1882, but I really do want to kind of talk about the sexy part of Middle Tennessee pottery. My wife gets tired of these discussions, I'm sure, but I love these forms where we have these tapering bases where it basically you have a bulbous midsection and these wonderful handles, how they arch up and they don't join at the rim, but they come back down on the shoulder. And it's really something that's endemic to much of the pottery that's being made in Middle Tennessee from the 19th century into the 20th century. They're aesthetically attractive forms. Lafever would mark his wares that serrated stamp JL is on this particular form. Another example is this wonderful bottle that's carved with this faceted shoulder and then almost this horseshoe type carving around the perimeter. It's flattened, and then on the underside, notice the hex star stamping in a quad pattern. So it is actually signed James Lafever at the base. And this is also, I don't know if Tony Lewis is here, but I want to give a shout out to him. Really appreciative for many of these examples that I was able to photograph in the past few weeks. Here's a picture that was sold at auction of J.L. Dunn, 1887. Is this Jasper Dunn, one of the Dunn family dynasty potters, but it's an example that we believe is a 19th century form. And this is very interesting as well. This is a piece out of Tony Lewis's collection, Reuben Whitson. You know, it's really a bummer when we find like Sam Smith or somebody like that on a pot, but that is a strange name. What's fascinating is that he was born in White County in 1799. Again, the cutout of that county there. But notice the beautiful script in these little floral sprigs, almost reminiscent of the Webster School of Potters over in Randolph County, North Carolina, if anybody's familiar with those. So a really nice early survivor there. And then, not to be outdone with stamps, Jeff Spears, who also worked with many of these potting families, he's listed as a potter in White County from 1850 to 1880. Again, look at the serrated stamp, JS. So those are obviously nice when we find those examples. And then another potter that was working in Putnam County, but also worked among many of these families of Dunn and Lafever, was Thomas Klaus. And he had this distinctive stamp, T.W. Klaus, with the S backward on it. But we're looking now, we're kind of transitioning a little bit later here, and they're more utilitarian forms, but still somewhat graceful. Here's an example of R.A. Elrod from Putnam County. He signed in script, and again, we've got stoneware with these with this utilitarian form. And then you can probably see the 6 here, which is denoting gallon capacity. And then next, we're looking at a stoneware jug by James Lafever Jr. So he is second in line after James Lafever. And again, look at these large, and you can see the little quarter in the bottom there. That's a large jug. We're losing some of that tapering, but he's got this distinctive stamp, James Lafever's maker. and we're really kind of going into the early 20th century at this point. So that's a little bit of a background on historical pottery forms and then utilitarian forms from the late 19th to early 20th century. And then we start transitioning. Well, actually, before I go there, let me also give you an overview that'll be helpful here. These forms really are considered those traditional stoneware pottery forms from Middle Tennessee. Notice the pictures with these rims and the spouts, and then the application of the handle, how it joins down further on the upper shoulder of the jar. And probably as we look down on the second row, you can see jugs, of which I call the Yankee outlier. The third one over, it's joined at the rim, which I don't find very attractive. But the potter could care less. But the situation there is, it is definitely a Middle Tennessee form, that brown to gray transition on that form. But most of the handles are much more like the graceful handle that's either on the left or right. And notice the gray to brown, gray to black, gray to brown transition of clays. So most of the jugs you'll see these interesting glazing effects on the form. So that'll give you kind of a profile there. As we then transition in where I would say kind of more of these art pottery forms, which is we're going into the 20th century. And much of the time, these things are thought to be from the 19th century, kind of these retarded air forms. But actually, these are probably from the first or 1920s, 1930s period. And the question comes in, as you'll see more of these art pottery forms, where did that influence come from? And we don't know. I think this presentation is going to really throw a lot of forms at you and ask more questions, hoping somebody doing their master's thesis or PhD or publication desire will really pick up and study many of these things more. But notice again that the brown to gray, brown to green to gray to brown transition, these strap handles, and it keeps happening, folks. Look at this. These are miniature forms. So these potters are not in a densely populated area. And so as a result, it is from a standpoint of being able to produce income, and especially as prohibition happened, manufacture stoneware, many of the utilitarian demand for utilitarian wares started to drop off. So they're adapting, and they're really trying to take their wares and their gifts and put them into kind of the tourist retail setting with either hardware stores or hotels in the area, and they're making these in miniature. So I just think it's fascinating how small, you can see the quarter or penny beside some of these things. They're still making these little strap handles, but also they are able to achieve this kind of tri-tone color on the clays. And you got the ruffled undulating rims here as well on these forms. And it goes into more forms. We see grease lamps and candlesticks that are being offered to the public, as well as flower pot forms as well. But again, you can kind of see thematically the use of this pleasing dual or tritone colors. And then some of them just have more of a gray to green transition color. These are two last forms that I show. You would have thought the grease lamp was mid-19th century or earlier. It's early 20th century, but what a remarkable form. Look at the handle there and the reservoir at the bottom. And then this is a large candlestick form with these pulled handles and how the handles end up terminating at the base and kind of spreading out toward the base. And even we have other forms. They're making mugs and cups, and this is a salt over to the right. So they're really trying different combinations of things, whatever works. So with that, now we're getting into the family. So I wanted to give you a precursor. Y'all are going to be experts on these by the time we get through. But we start with this picture of Cappy Hedgecough, Cheryl, one of the Hedgecough descendants. And what's wonderful, this example here, you're going to get tested on it. Pay attention to that form. It's in the State Museum, I believe. And so those that photograph provides evidence for us to make attributions on certain potters. And again, these potters, Hedgecough and Dunn and so Lafever, they were really intermarrying and working together. So that's why it's a little bit fuzzy sometimes on who made what and the attributions. So we go to some examples that this one sold with us a few years ago, but noticed this Hedgecough pottery, which is Putnam County, Tennessee, is where Hedgecough was working at that time. It's an urn form, but there's certain patterns you can quickly see, this kind of rope coggling around the rim and this rope coggled handle, which is kind of interesting. And then these spurs that are happening on the handles. So we're just above White County there on the map. Then we go to another example. This is an example Crocker Farm sold, which I get excited actually to see other auction houses selling Middle Tennessee pottery to kind of spread the interest and exposure to pottery from this area. The effect of the glaze here with salt glaze along with the application of other slips and so forth, this one is really like no other that I've seen. Most of the ones of Hedgecough don't have this kind of splattering effect that we've seen. So it's still something we're trying to figure out what happened in the kiln there. But notice the handle. There's that spur. There's that roping on the handle. Okay, so then we're going, and if it wasn't enough, then you got another attribute that can help you make an attribution of other forms that surface. So we've got, you guys are probably getting tired now of the spurred handle and the rope design, right? But now pay attention to the ruffled rim here, that kind of undulating rim. And so then we go to this example. I believe this example appeared on the roadshow. We sold it a few years ago, and it was thought at that time to be mid-19th century. It is not. It's 1920 at the earliest. I looked to Tracy Parks out there. I would think maybe even as late as 1930s, but wonderful. But this is the culmination of forms here. Notice our undulating rim here, the ruffled rim, and look at the applied clay that goes around the jar here. And remember our grave marker here. So this is where we're making attributions on Hedgecough, but then we have these applied diamonds and hearts. And notice again the glazing effect. You've got this drip, see this brown drip over this stoneware clay, and then this kind of salt green effect at the top of the jar. And then here I show an example at the bottom that you can see the stoneware bottom. So all of this um, appearance of the skin of the jar is the combination of both the salt glaze and the applied slip that was done on this glaze on this particular form. So that's Hedgecough. Now let's go into Dunn. George Washington Dunn was born 1870 to 1944. It's wonderful, obviously, when they leave their name on these forms. And so this one had sine wave incising. It's two handles. And notice again where you almost have the lower half of the stoneware piece where it doesn't even appear to have much of a glaze at all on it. And he is working, the Dunn family and George Washington Dunn is working both in DeKalb and Putnam County. But notice we're talking on just about 3 or 4 counties here. And also you have the Lafevers, Dunns, and Spears Potters working in those areas. So we have another form. We got quadruple handles on top of handles. So this is really what I call our basic form that's attributed to George Washington Dunn, and you're going to be like, okay, you're leaping too far here. How do you know about these handles? That's a new phenomenon. How are you making that attribution? Quite large, 23 inches in height. And what I would say to something that we're passionate about, this is probably the technical geekiness of me, but that form was sold in 07, 08. At the technology at that time, we'd probably be able to save about 1,000 pixel width by 1,000. It's inadequate now for further research. I can't go back and get that jar. And so one of the things that you'll see, many of these examples are photographed extensively, but also we are holding and keeping all the raw files. We are talking gigabytes of all these. You know, when people talk about NFTs with art and holding on digital imagery, we as an auction house have got to solve that problem. So anything we've been selling, at least in the past 3 to 4 years, have access to the raw files, which are huge. But the fact that we have those allows researchers, whether if Tiffany's researchers said, hey, can I look at this particular potter? We think we've got some information we want to find out more on, that we can give them files that they can expand and really understand and look at these. And so this is something I'm trying to evangelize to other auction houses, because really we are to steward these objects. They pass in and out of our hands, and many of these things will never go to a museum or get published. We need to basically do what we can to store as much information about the objects as possible. So this Dunn advances to this one, and it's easy, isn't it? Because on that one, made by G.W. Dunn, 1930. So there we have the 4 handles, but we got this application of, and don't be intimidated by my technical word, I'm going to call them gumdrops. But we have these little applied gumdrops around the upper rim, middle, and midsection. And this is probably, you know, this was one you would pay a little bit more. And then let's go to the one on steroids. Y'all want to see that? I don't know if y'all ready to handle it.
We're ready.
Okay. So, yeah. I think they should have put a kitchen sink here instead of the horse. But what we have here, I think this is commemorating a wedding. And we have notice the handles, and your test is coming in the next slide, so y'all need to pay attention, is this application of these little circular gumdrops, but also the hearts, and then they've applied and put this horse on the bottom. And then we have September 1st, 1911 on one side, and then May 25th, 1938 on the other side. So again, people are kind of shocked to see those dates. We're well into the 20th century. But these guys are figuring out to say, I'm not going to be able to maybe sell these utilitarian wares like I thought. How can we adapt? And they're able to use these presentation pieces, these large forms they're able to sell to the public by profusely decorating them. All right, so then here's your test. This example here is Dunn or Hedgecough. And so we look at, I put that out in front of you all. Here you have those handles with the applied kind of gumdrops, but then again, remember Hedgecough in this crimping that he did, this design. Look at the cross down at the lower portion, the diamonds that you can kind of see that flank the cross, and of course this heart design. And it's undecorated on the back. So it's a tough call because both of these potters, the characteristics, it seems like they were looking at each other, and there's a kind of a cross design effect. So here is an example that was sold at auction with us several years ago. And one thing that's wonderful about many of these tourist pieces that were sold to the public is these inscriptions. George Dunn, the potter, November 2nd, 1875. It's not 1875. It's probably early 20th century. So this potter is probably commemorating something from that period because it's too early for the birth date of that potter. But the other reason why I show this slide, I'm trying to also get you exposed to other characteristics. Notice these little rat tails handles, terminuses at the end. You see what's left of one to the left here. So we have an unsigned example here. And it makes a correlation to say, hey, this is probably a George Dunn as well for this form. This one's got more, again, this tri-transition. This is just more of a two-color effect. And so here is another jar that will extrapolate from the last example to look at the handle terminuses, which are broken there at the end, but you can see that they actually were broken and also had these little rat tail spurs. But notice this kind of channel crimping around the rim. So this is why also we attribute it to the Dunn pottery, since these other type of handle terminuses that Dunn has signed those. And I love it. This is buy one, get one free or whatever. You know, get another one to match me. Hey, you hadn't bought enough. You know, pony up to the bar. So it's very, and again, desirable examples, obviously, in any area of stoneware is when we have these fun inscriptions on the pottery. So I'm going to go back a little bit in time, but I need to show you something here. This is a curveball. You ready for that? We've got John A. Roberts, who's coming from North Carolina, and he's actually working a little bit earlier. You could have argued I should have thrown him up at the first, but I'm going a little bit back in time to give you another perspective of what's going on with another potter. Here he is marked as wares. These are not sexy. They're utilitarian, but they're alkaline glazed. That's not Albany slip. And so makes sense. He's coming from North Carolina where an alkaline glaze tradition is very strong. And so that's where you see those two examples. And again, he's working in Cookeville, Putnam County. And so guess what? Here we have cobalt decoration. Remember we were talking about that earlier. It is almost completely absent in Middle Tennessee pottery, but apparently Roberts is using it, and actually my understanding from the late Carol Waller that there was a Swiss potter that actually decorated for him, and what you see is this cobalt decoration, but you really only see it on these large vessels from Roberts, 10 gallons up to 12. I think there's a few more that are larger than that. And look at these wonderful sprigs, the gallon capacity, and you can see at the base here where it has Robert's name. And then this is kind of the culmination of really Robert's most exciting works, which were these harvest vessels or monkey jug type forms. This one attributed to Roberts is in the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Museum, but also there are at least two others known. Frederick Douglass, one that's recognizing Frederick Douglass, and I think it has on the base inscribed the Honorable Frederick Douglass. And there also is another harvest jug known that's here in Nashville with a collector that you all met this weekend. So I've got to believe that we have more of these forms, and hopefully more education about Roberts will bring more of them to the surface. And of the traditional potters, I'm kind of closing out here with Riley Lafever. And these are chicken waterers. It's pretty easy to attribute to him because here he's got holding one here at the bottom. So again, the Lafevers toward the end of the line for that legacy of that family, they start saying, hey, we're not selling the utilitarian stuff like James Lafever Jr. was, so we've got to adapt. And so he's making these effigy type forms with chicken waterers. Other forms that are attributed to Lafever pottery is this, what is a rabbit? Looks like a dog to me. And even this sandstone type dog effigy here. You've got what almost looks like an Anna pig with inscriptions, rabbits, chickens, birds. So they are known for all these animal effigy forms. And then toward the end here, they're trying to sell their wares any way they can. This one's in script, Nashville Mercantile. These are advertising pieces. One's for Red Bowling Springs Hotel. Another one's for a hardware store. And in this correspondence, I don't know if you can see here, the potters are interacting with the store owners, and the store owners drawing pictures to say, make more of these. And they're showing like a flower pot here and a vase. So they're really trying to make this work in the retailing avenues that were left for them as this pottery came to a close in the 30s. And so what brought it to an end, really, there's three factors, and there's others in there, but the rise of manufactured pottery at that time, glass production, you didn't have to have things transported in these large jars. You could use glass. And then the rise of prohibition. So these last two forms that I show you here on the traditional pottery, they're kind of in opposition to each other. This is a DeKalb County, what is called a thumper form that feeds the primary cattle for a still. So this is definitely coming to an end in Prohibition. And then what's interesting, that we have this picture extolling the virtues of Prohibition, you know, by a potter that had to be intention, because that's the very reason why his pottery's coming to an end. But anyway, that was a late 19th, that actually saying late 19th century, but it's probably early 20th century. So this is again 1930. This is an inscribed 1930 piece. This is really the end of the of the traditional pottery forms. And so Tracy Parks reminded me, you're still not really at the end. The end is Cookeville Pottery, and I'm really glad that he was so kind to provide these examples. And it's like they're just trying to make this work. By this time, most of these traditional potteries have closed, but in Cookeville, they were making a go at art pottery. The clays were no longer from the Cumberland Plateau. They were coming in and being imported from West Tennessee. They were kaolin clays, almost white in appearance, and the glazes were commercial. And so you have these wild reds and blacks, and you have other interesting colors that are used there. And so this is truly the end, but even though you have these imported clays and glazes, they're still following that traditional form a bit, aren't they? Look at your pictures and the flower part and so forth. So again, what I mentioned before is Smith & Rogers is a further delve into this, and also I just want to thank again Tracy Parks for his help, Tony Lewis for their help, for his help as well. Thank you all.